My name is Margaret Maggie Cotter, and I'm 70 years old. The day that changed everything in my quiet, predictable life began like any other Tuesday in early spring. Gray skies over Seattle, the smell of rain in the air, and a cup of lukewarm coffee that I didn't have time to finish before heading to my doctor's appointment. For years, Dr. Michael Reed had been my physician, a kind, meticulous man with gentle eyes who had seen me through every checkup, every cold, every quiet panic about aging. But that morning, something about him felt different. He smiled when I entered, but it was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the blood pressure cuff around my arm. "Everything looks good, Mrs. Carter," he said after a long pause, his voice tight, almost rehearsed. "Your labs are perfect. Your heart is strong. You have many good years ahead of you." I nodded, relieved, until I noticed that he wouldn't look me in the eye. As I got up to leave, he stepped closer, pretending to help me with my coat. That's when I felt the faintest brush of paper sliding into my purse. He did it so smoothly that, for a moment, I thought I had imagined it. "Take good care of yourself, Mrs. Carter," he said softly, his tone lower than before. "And remember, family isn't always what it seems." Those words sent a chill straight through my spine. I didn't dare look at the note until I was in the cab home. The city blurred past the window, wet asphalt, traffic lights glinting through drizzle, and all I could hear was his voice echoing in my head. Why would Dr. Reed, a man I trusted for nearly 20 years, act this way? When I arrived home, my son Daniel, my daughter-in-law Heather, and my granddaughter Chloe were in the living room, sitting too close together, whispering. Their voices dropped instantly when they saw me. Heather was clutching a stack of papers that she quickly hid behind her back. "How was your appointment, Mom?" Daniel asked, his smile polite but forced. "Everything's fine," I replied. "The doctor said I'm in perfect health." Heather shot him a look, quick, nervous, and he gave a barely noticeable shrug. Something in the room felt heavy, like the air itself had secrets. "That's great, Grandma," Chloe said, her teenage voice strangely flat. "It means you've got plenty of time left to enjoy yourself." The words were harmless on the surface, but her tone chilled me. That evening at dinner, the silence was unbearable. Daniel stared at his plate, Heather answered in one-word replies, and Chloe avoided my eyes. The sound of the clock ticking on the kitchen wall became deafening. "Is something wrong?" I finally asked. "No, Mom," Daniel said quickly. "Everything's fine. We're just tired." I forced a smile, but my heart was pounding. After cleaning up, I went to my bedroom, turned on the bedside lamp, and finally pulled out the folded piece of paper from my purse. That my hands trembled as I unfolded it. The handwriting was rushed, slanted unmistakably. "Dr. Reed, stop Mrs. Carter. Your family came to see me yesterday. Heather asked if I could declare that you needed special care, that you were losing touch with reality. They want to put you in a nursing home and take control of your asset. Don't go home, run." Doctor read. The room started spinning. My legs went weak. I had to sit down on the bed, clutching the note as if it were a lifeline. My own family, my Daniel, the boy I had adopted when he was just 2 years old, abandoned by his birth parents, the boy my late husband Richard and I had loved more than life itself. I had given him everything, my time, my love, my savings, my entire youth, and now, he and his family wanted to lock me away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made my heart race. The shadows on the ceiling seemed to whisper betrayal. At around 2 in the morning, I heard faint voices coming from the kitchen. I crept to my bedroom door and listened. They were speaking in low tones, but I could make out every word. "The damn doctor wouldn't cooperate," Heather said, frustration in her voice. "I told him Maggie's losing her mind, that she forgets things, leaves the stove on, but he said she's perfectly fine." "Relax," Daniel replied coldly. "We'll find another doctor, one who'll sign what we need." "And what do we do with her in the meantime?" Chloe asked, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "I already got accepted into college. I need that money now, not in 5 years when she finally dies of old age." "Chloe," Daniel snapped, though his tone lacked conviction. "Don't talk like that." Then, after a pause, he sighed. "But you have a point. We can't wait forever. The house alone is worth $500,000. Heather's voice cut in, smooth and venomous. "Exactly. I didn't marry into this family to play nursemaid to a senile old woman. I thought she'd be gone by now, but she's still here, spending our money. Our money." The words burned into me like acid. All my life's savings, everything Richard and I had built, they saw it as theirs. I pressed my palm against the hallway wall to steady myself. The paint cooled beneath my fingers. In the kitchen, the refrigerator's motor hummed like a witness too afraid to speak. First thing in the morning, I'm making copies of all her cards, Heather whispered, paper rustling in her hands. We'll spend a little at a time. She won't notice. Good, Daniel said. And I'll talk to an attorney. There has to be a way to get her declared incompetent without a doctor. And if that doesn't work, Heather added, voice turning bright with a cruelty that made my stomach twist, we make her lose her mind for real. Switch her meds, hide her things, gaslight her until any doctor agrees. Chloe exhaled, impatient. Can we just get this over with? I need tuition now, not when Grandma finally croaks. They laughed, soft, mean, laughter like clinking glasses at a celebration I hadn't been invited to. Something in me went quiet. Not my heart, that had been cracked wide open the moment I read Dr. Reed's note. It was something older, deeper, a coil of steel at the center of me I hadn't felt since Richard died. The coil tightened. You've underestimated me, I thought. For decades, you've mistaken kindness for weakness. I slipped back into my room and sat on the edge of the bed, the old Seth Thomas clock on my dresser, ticking in steady strokes retirement gift, a polite drum keeping time, while my life came undone. I stared at the note. Don't go home. Run. I wouldn't run like prey. I would leave like a strategist. I took out my phone and, with hands finally steady, opened the voice recorder. Then I tucked it into the pocket of my robe, stepped into the hallway, and made my way toward Daniel and Heather's door. A low murmur leaked through. Numbers, dates, words like power of attorney and facility tours. Chloe's door was ajar. I could hear the sharp clack of her acrylic nails on glass as she scrolled, whispering to a friend about Grandma's Alzheimer's. I let the recorder drink it all. Back in my room, I packed a small suitcase, documents, 2 changes of clothes, my medications, a framed photo of Richard and me on the Bainbridge ferry, his windblown hair crooked under a mariner's cap. Last, I slid from the locked drawer a slim black notebook, my ledger of account numbers, safe deposit details, the contact information of the offshore advisor Richard had vetted himself years before. At Dawn's first gray smudge, I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen table beside the ceramic fruit bowl Chloe hated. Gone to run some errands. Back later, Maggie. Then I slipped out into a Seattle morning that smelled of wet cedar and coffee grounds. That cab ride to the bank felt like floating. We passed a bus shelter where a young couple huddled under a shared umbrella. I wondered when I'd last allowed someone to share an umbrella with me, to shield me. The thought surprised me with its ache. Inside Puget Mutual Bank, a teller named Emily Brooks greeted me with a kind, practiced smile. Good morning, Mrs. Carter. How can I help? I need to withdraw some cash, I said. $5,000, and I'd like to check the status of my external accounts. Her brows ticked up just a fraction. Of course, she counted the bills in careful fans and lowered her voice. Are you sure you want to carry this much? I am, I said. I have personal matters. When the money was in my purse and the confirmations were in my hand, a breath I didn't know I'd been holding escaped my chest. My secret remained intact. The walls they thought they were closing in around me. Paper, from the bank. I took a cab to the Grand Imperial Hotel, polished limestone. Quiet doorman. A lobby full of flowers that smelled faintly of lemon leaves and polish. The receptionist, Lisa Park, found me a suite on the 10th floor, with a view where the Sound folded into the sky like pewter. How long will you be staying with us, Mrs. Carter? She asked. As long as it takes, I said, and surprised myself by smiling. In the suite. I closed the door and let my back rest against it. Eyes closed, listening to the hush. No footsteps outside. No whispered plans. I cried, then a deep old cry that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the recognition that I had been living as a ghost in my own life. When I was done, I made tea from the little kettle, sat at the glass-topped desk, and called Thomas Tom Whitaker-esque. I had chosen him in advance, reading late-night articles about elder fraud in the glow of my phone, while Daniel snored in the next room. Double quotes, Mrs. Carter, he said after I explained, his voice measured and alert. Do you have evidence? I do. I sent the audio files, and while he listened in silence, I stared out at a gull riding the wind, arrogant and effortless. When Tom spoke again, his voice had sharpened. This is elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, potentially forgery, and identity theft. We'll move quickly. First, we'll secure your accounts and place alerts. Second, we'll engage a private investigator, Nathan Price, to document their activities. Third, we'll line up independent psychiatric evaluations to preempt any guardianship claim. Are you ready for this? Yes, I said, and the coil of steel in me thrummed like a tuning fork. I'm ready. By afternoon, my phone lit with calls. Daniel 12 times, Heather 8, Chloe 5, then a flood of texts, all variations of concern lacquered over controlled. Mom, where are you? This isn't like you. Please answer. We're worried. We'll call the police. I answered once. I'm taking a day for myself. I told Daniel, calm as a lake, I'll be back when I'm ready. This is erratic, he said too quickly. Are you taking your meds? You don't sound like yourself. There it was, the seed of their narrative. I pressed record on a second phone. Tom had advised me to purchase at the hotel gift shop, a cheap little thing with a clean number. I've never been better, I said, and ended the call. The doorbell chimed. Room service. I hadn't ordered. Tom's assistant had sent lunch, a neat tray and a typed checklist. Called Dr. Reed. Photographed the note. Cloud backup of files. I did each thing in order, methodical, the way Richard used to line up screws on a cloth when he fixed the fence. When Dr. Reed answered, his relief was palpable. Mrs. Cotter Magyar, you safe? I am, I said. Your note saved me. He exhaled. I'm filing a report with Adult Protective Services and making a written record of yesterday's visit. If anyone contacts me, I will refer them to counsel. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than he knew. By early evening, Nathan Price had already sent his first update. In a single day, Heather attempted to sell 2 pieces of my antique furniture online. Daniel visited my bank and tried to access my accounts, claiming I'd had an episode. He was turned away. Chloe told friends I had advanced Alzheimer's and asked to borrow money for my care. The report ended with a grainy photo of the 3 of them meeting a man Nathan identified as Victor Cole, a known forger. I forwarded the report to Tom. His reply came at once. We accelerate. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow. Phase 2. I stood at the window and watched the last light sink behind the cranes on the waterfront. In the glass, my reflection looked unfamiliar. A woman alone. Yes, but also a woman unafraid. I set my purse on the desk, smoothed the old mariner's cap beside the framed fairy photo, and whispered to Richard, they think I'm running. I turned off the lamp. I'm hunting. Morning came soft and gray, the kind of Seattle light that seeps in gently through sheer curtains. I hadn't slept, but I didn't feel tired. There was a calm inside me, a focus that came from knowing exactly what I had to do. Phase 2, Tom had called it, but to me it was something else entirely. It was resurrection. I stood before the hotel mirror and really looked at myself for the first time in years. My hair was dull and uneven, my eyes ringed with shadows, my skin pale from too many quiet days spent indoors, waiting for a family that had stopped seeing me as a person. That woman, I decided, was gone. She had died the night I heard their laughter. I picked up the hotel phone and called the concierge. Do you know a good salon nearby? I asked. Within an hour, I was sitting in a bright studio surrounded by the smell of shampoo and warm air. A young stylist named Ashley Nugent smiled at me in the mirror. What do you want to do today, ma'am? She asked. I met her eyes in the glass. I want to look like someone who's just remembered who she is. She grinned. Then let's bring her back. For 3 hours, Ashley worked with quiet precision, trimming, shaping, brushing in highlights that shimmered like the reflection of sunlight on water. When she turned my chair around at last, the woman in the mirror made my throat tighten. Her hair was silver and gold, elegant, alive. Her eyes, my eyes, looked sharper, brighter. You look powerful, Ashley said simply. I feel powerful, I whispered. I walked out of the salon and into the world like someone reborn. My next stop was the Montgomery and Whitaker law firm, where Tom and his team had already assembled a small war room of files and reports. They greeted me with nods of quiet respect. Double quotes, Mrs. Carter, Tom said as I entered. You're just in time. Nathan's been busy. He spread photographs and printouts across the conference table. In one, Heather was meeting with a jeweler, trying to sell pieces from my late husband's collection. In another, Daniel was standing outside my bank, talking to someone on the phone, his face twisted with frustration. There were even screenshots of Chloe's social media posts, her pretending to fundraise for my medical care. Tom's tone was calm but electric. We have everything we need: financial fraud, attempted identity theft, conspiracy, emotional abuse. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. It's criminal. For a moment, I couldn't speak. To see their betrayal so plainly documented, printed and numbered in a lawyer's folder, made it real in a way that words alone hadn't. What happens now? I asked quietly. Now, Tom said, we let them reveal themselves publicly. We don't chase them. We build the stage and wait for them to perform. That afternoon, I did something simple but symbolic. I went shopping, not because I needed new clothes, but because I needed to remind myself that I was still allowed to take up space in the world. I bought 3 dresses, one black, one red, one deep green. The woman behind the counter called them power colors, and I decided she was right. When I returned to the hotel, I hung the dresses neatly in the wardrobe, poured myself a glass of wine, and watched the skyline turn gold. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like someone waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That night, as I ate dinner in the hotel restaurant, my phone rang. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom, finally, where the hell have you been? His voice was sharp, brittle. I've been taking care of myself, I said calmly, something I haven't done in years. This isn't like you, he snapped. You're acting irrationally. You sound confused. I almost smiled. Confused? No, Daniel. I've never seen things so clearly. He hesitated, then sighed, lowering his voice. Listen, Mom, we're worried about you. Heather's been crying all day. Chloe hasn't eaten. We just want you to come home. We'll talk things through. Talk, I repeated softly, like the kind of talks you had in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. The silence on the line was long and heavy. Then he said, trying to sound stern, you must have misunderstood something. We would never. Don't lie to me, Daniel. My voice came out sharper than I intended. I heard everything, every word, about the doctor, about the nursing home, about how you'd make me lose my mind if you had to. Mom, he said, but his voice cracked on the word. I leaned back in my chair, watching the candlelight flicker across my wineglass. I'm giving you one chance, I said. Confess what you did. Apologize. Return what you stole. If you do that, maybe I'll find it in me to forgive you. He let out a short, humorless laugh. You're imagining things. This is your age talking. No, Daniel, I said quietly. This is your conscience talking, and you should listen while you still can. When I hung up, my hands were trembling not from fear, but from the weight of finally saying what had needed to be said for years. The next morning, Tom called. Mrs. Carter, he said, it's time. Time for what? I asked. For phase 3, he said. We're going to let them expose themselves. By noon, I was sitting in a real estate office on Pike Street, dressed in the black dress and pearls Richard had given me for our 20th anniversary. The agent, a young man named Jason Miller, was showing me glossy brochures of luxury homes. I'm looking for something modern, I told him. Secure, plenty of sunlight. Of course, Mrs. Carter, he said, flipping through listings. I have just the thing. And then I heard them. Daniel's voice, loud and self-assured, drifting from the entrance. Heather's sharp tone behind him. Chloe's higher, impatient one. They hadn't seen me yet. We're here about our mother's property. Daniel was telling another agent. She's not well. We have legal power of attorney, and we'd like to start the appraisal. For a second, time stopped. Then, as if guided by something larger than myself, I stood and walked into the lobby. Hello, family, I said. They froze. Daniel's face drained of color. Heather's mouth fell open. Chloe looked like she'd seen a ghost. What are you doing here? Daniel stammered. The same thing you are, apparently, I said evenly. Except I'm buying, not selling. The entire office had gone silent. I could feel every eye on us. Jason turned to me, confused. Mrs. Carter, are these? Yes, I said, smiling faintly. These are my family. Or at least, they used to be. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Daniel stood frozen, his mouth half open, as if words had abandoned him. Heather's hand tightened on her handbag until the fake leather creaked, and Chloe's eyes darted wildly toward the door, as though she might bolt if given the chance. Mrs. Carter, Jason asked carefully, glancing between us, is everything all right? Perfectly, I said. I was just about to tour a new house when I ran into these 3 trying to sell mine. That's not true, Heather blurted, voice pitched to high. There's been a misunderstanding. My mother-in-law has been unwell. She gets confused about things. Unwell, I repeated, letting my voice carry through the open office. That's strange, considering my doctor says I'm in excellent health. I turned to Jason. Do I look confused to you? Jason's mouth twitched, but he didn't answer. The other agent, the one Daniel had been speaking to, stepped back uneasily. Sir, do you have legal documentation for this power of attorney you mentioned? Daniel cleared his throat. It's in process, he muttered. In other words, I said, you don't have one. I reached into my purse and took out my phone. Tom, I said when he answered, I'm at Miller and Associates Realty. My family is here, claiming authority over my property. Can you send someone to document this? Already on the way, Tom replied. 15 minutes. I ended the call and looked at my son, the boy I had once rocked to sleep in a tiny second-hand crib. The man who now stood before me as a stranger. You should sit down, Daniel, I said softly. You're about to need it. Heather's eyes glistened with desperation. Maggie, please, she said, switching to the voice she used on telemarketers. We were just trying to help. We thought it would be better for you, better for me. I cut in. Forging documents, switching my medication, lying to doctors, that was for my benefit. A murmur spread through the office. The receptionist's typing had stopped. 2 clients waiting by the window had turned around, pretending not to stare. You don't know what you're talking about, Daniel said, his voice tightening. You're sick, am I? I pressed play on my phone. The sound filled the room, his voice. Unmistakable, cold and deliberate. We make her really lose her mind, switch her medications, hide her things, tell her she did things she didn't do. In a month, any doctor will certify she's mentally ill. Heather went pale. Chloe gasped audibly. Someone behind the desk whispered, Oh my God, that's illegal. Heather shrieked. You can't record people without permission. Not in this state, I said evenly, and certainly not when it prevents a crime. Right on cue, the glass doors slid open. 2 men in dark suits entered, followed by a woman carrying a notary's briefcase. Tom Whitaker's associates, Mrs. Carter, one of them said. We're here to confirm that you are of sound mind and to document the situation. Thank you, gentlemen. I gestured toward my family. These individuals claim they have the right to sell my property and manage my affairs. Could you please verify their documentation? The taller lawyer turned to Daniel. Sir. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. We don't have it with us, he said finally. In other words, I said again, you have nothing. Heather's composure cracked. You ungrateful old woman, she hissed, her face twisting. We've taken care of you for years. You'd be nothing without us. I turned to her, calm as the eye of a storm. You're right, Heather, I said quietly. I would be nothing with you. The notary's pen scratched against her pad. Cameras from passing realtors' phones clicked quietly. The perfect family was unraveling in front of strangers, and there was no going back. When we stepped out onto the sidewalk, they followed, voices rising. Mom, wait, Daniel shouted, his hand grabbing at my sleeve. We can fix this. Please think about Chloe. Chloe's voice broke. Grandma, I didn't mean any of it. You know I love you. I turned to them. The city noise swelling around Oostrefik gulls, the faint wail of a siren somewhere far off. Love isn't saying the words, I said. Love is what you do when no one's watching, and I heard everything you did when you thought I wasn't. Heather dropped the pretense entirely. You're destroying this family, she spat. No, I said. You destroyed it the night you laughed about driving me insane. I stepped into a waiting cab, the door closing like a period on a long, cruel sentence. Through the window I saw their faces pale, furious, afraid, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt free. At Tom's office later that afternoon, he was smiling when I arrived. They made a critical mistake, he said, pushing a folder toward me. Inside were photos and transcripts. After you left the real estate office, Daniel went straight to a man named Victor Cole and paid him $50,000 to forge your medical documents. I blinked. $50,000. Where would he even get that? From the credit cards Heather opened in your name, Tom said. But here's the beautiful part. Victor Cole is an FBI informant. He recorded everything. Your family is now under federal investigation for document fraud and elder abuse. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The justice felt unreal, too neat, like something from a television drama. Tom leaned forward. The Bureau wants your cooperation. They'll handle the criminal charges, but they've asked if you'd like to file a civil suit as well. Frankly, Mrs. Cartner, you'd win. I looked down at my hands, steady, unshaken, the hands of a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes of her own heartbreak. No, I said slowly. Not yet. He raised an eyebrow. Not yet. I want the truth out first, I said, completely, for everyone to see. I'm tired of being silent. Tom studied me for a moment, then nodded. Then we'll do it your way. That night, in my hotel suite, I opened my laptop and stared at the blank screen. My reflection shimmered faintly in the glass silver hair, sharp eyes, steady shoulders, the woman I'd rediscovered. I created a new account on a live stream platform and typed a title that felt both terrifying and perfect. Grandmother tells the truth. Then I hit go live. The first few seconds of the live stream were silent, except for the soft hum of my laptop fan. My face appeared on the screen, framed by the warm light of the hotel lamp behind me. I had no makeup on, no script in front of me, only a quiet resolve sitting in my chest. For a moment, I almost clicked end. But then I thought of Dr. Reed's trembling hands, of the laughter in my kitchen, of Richard's photo by the window, and I began to speak. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Margaret Carter, and I'm 70 years old. Tonight, I want to tell you a story about love, betrayal, and what it means to finally wake up." At first, there were 3 viewers, then 10, then 25. The little number in the corner ticked upward like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. I told them everything: how I had adopted Daniel when he was a boy, how Richard and I had built our lives from nothing, how I had believed that love and loyalty were the same thing. I told them about the doctor's note that had saved me, about the whispers in the kitchen, about the secret plan to drive me insane. My voice shook only once when I played the recording of their laughter, but the comments that flooded in steadied me. "You're brave. This is happening to my mother too. We believe you." When I looked again, there were more than 500 viewers. I showed them the copies of the forged documents, the credit card statements Heather had opened in my name, the photos of the jewelry she'd tried to sell. I explained how my son had lost his job but pretended everything was fine, how my granddaughter had joined their lies for college money. By the time I finished, more than 3,000 people were watching. And then, the phone rang. The name on the screen made my breath catch. Chloe. I answered on speaker so the viewers could hear. "Hello, sweetheart." Her voice was trembling. "Grandma, please, turn off the live stream. You're ruining our lives." I stared into the camera. "Ruining your lives? Chloe, you were going to have me locked away in a nursing home so you could sell my house. You told your friends I had Alzheimer's." "It wasn't like that," she cried. "Mom and Dad said it was the best thing for you. I didn't know they were serious. And when you laughed that night about needing the money now instead of waiting for me to die, was that not serious either?" Silence. On the live stream chat, comments poured in. "Stand your ground. She needs to hear this. Keep talking, Grandma," Chloe whispered finally. "Everyone at school has seen this. My friends, my teachers, please, stop." "Then maybe they'll understand," I said, "what it looks like when greed eats a family alive." She sobbed. The sound raw through the speaker, and then the line went dead. The chat exploded with sympathy, anger, disbelief, but before I could process it, my phone buzzed again. "Daniel." "Mom." His voice thundered through the room. "Stop this madness right now. Do you have any idea what you're doing?" "Yes," I said quietly. "For the first time in years, I know exactly what I'm doing." "This is defamation," he spat. "You're destroying our reputation, our future." I almost laughed. "Your reputation? You mean the reputation of a man who paid a document forger $50,000 to declare his mother insane?" There was a long silence. "How do you even know about that?" he demanded. "Because, Daniel," I said, leaning closer to the camera, "you were foolish enough to trust the wrong criminal. Victor Cole works with the FBI. They have everything: your calls, your payments, your signatures. You're not just a bad son anymore. You're a federal case." His breath caught. "You're lying. Check the news tomorrow," I told him. "Or, better yet, wait for the knock on your door." The comments erupted, people typing FBI and little emojis of clapping hands flying across the screen. "Mom," Daniel said again, his voice breaking now, "we can still fix this. Please, don't do this to us." "To us?" I repeated. "You mean the people who plotted to destroy my mind, my dignity, and everything I owned?" "Mom, it wasn't personal," he said weakly. Those 3 words stopped me cold. "Not personal." I looked straight into the camera. "He says it wasn't personal," I said to the thousands of strangers who had now become my witnesses. "After 45 years of love, sacrifice, and grit, wasn't personal." "Mom," he pleaded, "I made mistakes. But you made a choice," I said softly. "And now, so have I." I hung up. The screen was still alive with comments, thousands of hearts floating upward. My story had gone viral in real time. When I finally ended the stream, there were more than 7,000 viewers and a flood of messages waiting in my inbox. Some were from reporters, some from lawyers, some from elderly people who had been through the same kind of betrayal and were thanking me for speaking aloud what they couldn't. One message, from a woman named Sandra Lopez, caught my eye. Mrs. Carter, I'm a social worker. Because of your live stream, I stopped a family from committing their father to a facility this morning. You're saving lives. I set the laptop aside and let the tears come. Not the tears of the broken woman who had packed her suitcase in the dark, but of someone reborn. The next morning, the story had made headlines. 70-year-old woman exposes family fraud in viral live stream. Tom called just after breakfast. His tone was electric. The FBI raided Victor Cole's office last night, he said. They have everything: recordings, bank transfers, forged drafts. He confessed that Daniel and Heather paid him for both a fake medical history and a falsified will declaring you incompetent. A will, I whispered. They planned to fake my will. Yes, they meant to have you committed, then use the forged documents to claim everything after your passing. It was all premeditated. For a moment, the world tilted, and I had to sit down. The betrayal was no longer just emotional, it was almost theatrical in its cruelty. But beneath the ache, another feeling bloomed, something fierce, steady, and bright. Then it's time for the next step, I said. Tom hesitated. Are you sure you're ready for trial? Oh, I'm ready, I said. But before the court, there's one more truth I want to face. He didn't ask what I meant. Maybe he already knew. That afternoon, I received another call from Chloe. This time, her voice was softer, stripped of pretense. Grandma, she said, can we talk, please? Just you and me. We met that afternoon in the cafe just off the hotel lobby. The place smelled of roasted coffee and sugar, sunlight slanting through tall windows. I chose a corner table where no one could overhear, though I left my phone on the table recording, as Tom had taught me. Chloe arrived, looking nothing like the polished, sharp-tongued girl I remembered. Her hair was uncombed, her sweatshirt creased, her eyes swollen from crying. When she saw me, she hesitated at the door like a child afraid to walk into the principal's office. Sit down, I said gently. She slid into the chair opposite me, hands clenched together. Grandma, she began, her voice small. I'm so sorry. I didn't know things would go this far. I looked at her for a long moment, trying to find some trace of the little girl who used to fall asleep on my lap watching old Disney movies. How far did you think it would go, Chloe? At first, she whispered, Mom and Dad just talked about convincing you to move into a retirement place. They said it would be better for you, that you'd have people your own age. I believed them. And then, her voice trembled. Then Mom started going through your things. She said she was organizing your files, but she was really calling your bank, pretending to be you. She told Dad you had more money than we thought. That's when everything changed. I felt the air leave my lungs. She pretended to be me. Chloe nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. She even went to see your old boss. She said she was updating your pension paperwork. I swear, Grandma, I didn't know until later. When Dad lost his job, they said they needed the money fast. That's when they started talking about other ways. Other ways, I repeated softly. They were desperate, Chloe said, her voice cracking. Dad has gambling debts over $100,000. Mom found out, and they started fighting all the time. She said it was his fault we were broke. He said it was hers for spending too much. And then they both said the same thing, that none of it would matter once they had your money. I sat still, letting the words sink in. $100,000. Gambling, lies on top of lies. And what about you? I asked. What part did you play? Chloe stared at the table. I needed money for college, and for, her voice trailed off. She put a trembling hand on her stomach, for other things. It took me a moment to understand. Chloe, I said quietly. Are you? She nodded, sobbing now. 3 months, he's older, married. He said he'd leave his wife, but now he won't even answer my calls. I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest both old and new. Oh, my poor girl, I whispered, you've made terrible mistakes. But you're still just a child who's been failed by everyone who should have protected you. She cried harder. I didn't know they wanted to make you lose your mind. I thought it was just about getting the doctor to say you needed help. But then I heard them talking about the medication switch. That's when I realized how wrong it was. Why didn't you say something? Because I was scared. She wiped her face with her sleeve. And now they're blaming me. Dad said if they get caught, they'll tell the police that it was all my idea, that I stole your jewelry, that I manipulated them because I needed money for drugs. Drugs, I repeated in disbelief. I don't even use drugs, Grandma, she cried. But Dad said no one would believe me anyway, that people always think the teenager is to blame. Her words cut through me like a knife. Even now, even cornered, Daniel was still looking for someone else to sacrifice. Do you have proof of what you're saying? I asked. Chloe nodded and pulled out her phone. I recorded their fights after you left. I have texts, voice messages, everything. I knew I'd need it someday. I looked into her tear-streaked face and, for the first time, saw not the selfish, spoiled girl I'd feared she'd become, but someone terrified and trying to survive. If you testify, Chloe, I said, your life will change. You'll be turning against your parents. My relationship with them is already over, she said, voice breaking but certain. The moment they decided to use me, to throw me away when they got scared, they stopped being my parents. We sat in silence for a while, the soft jazz from the cafe speakers filling the space between us. Finally, I reached across the table and took her hands. What do you want from me, Chloe? She looked up at me, her eyes wide and wet. I want to tell the truth. I want to fix what I can. I want to finish high school, go to college, and raise my baby without becoming like them. But I can't do it alone. My throat tightened. If you stand with me, I said slowly, I'll help you, with school, with the baby, with everything. But you have to promise one thing. Anything, she whispered. Promise me you'll never let anyone convince you that love means destroying yourself for them. Real love builds. It doesn't take. Do you understand? She nodded, wiping her tears. I understand, Grandma. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. For the first time in weeks, I felt a fragile warmth spread through me, trembling and uncertain, but alive. When she left the cafe, I sat for a long time staring at the untouched cup of coffee growing cold before me. Richard would have been proud of her courage, maybe, in some quiet way, proud of mine too. That night, I called Tom. We have a witness, I said. He was silent for a beat. Chloe, yes, she has recordings, texts, everything. Then, Mrs. Carter, he said, his voice steady. I think it's time to prepare for trial. And as I hung up, I realized something I hadn't dared to admit before. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about redemption, mine, and maybe Chloe's too. 3 weeks later, the courthouse steps were crowded with cameras and murmuring voices. The story had spread far beyond what I ever imagined. Newspapers called it the Carter case, as if it were something abstract, just another headline about greed and betrayal. But to me, it was simply my life, cracked open in front of the world. I arrived early that morning, wearing a tailored black suit and the small pearl earrings Richard had given me on our 15th anniversary. Beside me walked Chloe, her shoulders tense, her hair tied back neatly, a quiet defiance in her expression. She had chosen a modest navy dress, one that made her look older, braver. You nervous? I asked her as we climbed the courthouse stairs. She nodded. A little, but I keep thinking of what you said, that truth doesn't need to shout. It just has to stand. I smiled faintly. Then, let's stand. Inside the courtroom, the air was cold and heavy with anticipation. On the defense table sat Daniel and Heather. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize them. Daniel's suit hung loosely on him, his face gray and hollow. Heather, usually so polished, looked gaunt and brittle. The weight of exposure had drained the vanity from both of them. When they saw me, Heather looked away, but Daniel met my eyes. There was no apology, there only a kind of desperate pleading, the silent look of a man who still thought he could talk his way out of a storm. The judge entered, Judge Elaine Anderson, a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair and the nonsense calm of someone who'd seen too many ruined families. The bailiff called the room to order, and the prosecutor Robert Green rose to begin. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, this case is about betrayal in its purest form. It is about a son and daughter-in-law who plotted to declare an elderly woman mentally incompetent in order to steal everything she owned. His words fell like stones. He presented the evidence, piece by piece, the forged documents, the recordings, the credit card statements, the transcripts of their meeting with Victor Cole. Each detail painted the same picture of family that had turned greed into a strategy. When the first recording played, Daniel shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. The sound of his own voice filled the courtroom. We make her really lose her mind, switch her medications, hide her things. Someone in the gallery gasped. Heather pressed her hands to her face, whispering something under her breath. Then it was Chloe's turn. She stood slowly, took a breath, and walked to the witness stand. For a brief moment, I feared she might falter, but when she spoke, Her voice was clear. I love my grandmother, she began, and I came here today to tell the truth about what my parents did. The prosecutor asked her to describe the conversations she had overheard. She told them everything: how her mother had called the bank pretending to be me, how her father had spoken about doctors and nursing homes, how she had recorded their fights after I left. The defense attorney, Martin Feldman, tried to rattle her. Miss Carter, he said, pacing before the stand, you're pregnant, correct? Chloe nodded. And you need money, don't you? Yes, she said. He smiled thinly. Isn't it true that your grandmother promised to help you financially in exchange for this testimony? Chloe lifted her chin. No. My grandmother promised to help me because I finally chose to tell the truth. There's a difference. Her words hung in the air, strong and steady. I saw the jurors watching her, sympathetic, moved. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my heart pounding but my steps sure. Mrs. Carter, the prosecutor asked, how did you feel when you discovered your family's plan? I felt, I said slowly, like 45 years of my life had been a lie. I thought love meant loyalty. I thought family meant safety. But they made me question every moment I ever believed in those things. And how do you feel now? I looked across the room at Daniel, whose eyes had dropped to the table. Now I feel free, I said. Free from fear, free from pretending that cruelty deserves forgiveness. The defense tried to twist it. Mrs. Carter, Feldman said, isn't it true that you've hidden money from your family for years? Offshore accounts, properties abroad? Yes, I said, because I wanted to know if my son loved me for who I was, not for what I had. Now I know. The room was silent. Even the judge looked at me with something like quiet respect. The trial lasted 5 days. Each day, more witnesses came forward: neighbors, bank employees, even Dr. Reed himself, who testified about the visit from Heather, asking him to falsify my medical report. The final blow came from the FBI agent who presented evidence of the forged documents Daniel had paid for. When the closing arguments ended, the jury filed out. I waited, hands folded in my lap, while the seconds stretched into eternity. Chloe sat beside me, gripping my fingers so tightly I could feel her pulse. 2 hours later, the jury returned. The forewoman stood, her voice steady as she read the verdicts. On all counts: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and elder abuse, we find the defendants guilty. Heather burst into tears. Daniel didn't move, didn't blink, just stared ahead as if he'd been turned to stone. Judge Anderson's gavel fell once. Mr. Carter, she said, you are hereby sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Mrs. Carter, 10 years, with additional penalties for mortgage and identity fraud. When the bailiffs stepped forward, Heather tried to reach for me. Maggie, please, she cried. We were desperate. I stood, looking at her, one last time. Desperation doesn't excuse evil, I said quietly. Daniel finally looked up at me, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw regret, but it passed quickly, replaced by something else. Resentment, thought. As they were led away, Chloe wept silently beside me. I put an arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into me like she had when she was a little girl. Outside, the crowd applauded. It wasn't the kind of applause that follows victory, it was the kind that follows truth finally being spoken aloud. A reporter pushed through the throng. Mrs. Carter, he asked, do you feel justice has been served? I paused, feeling the cold wind on my face. Legal justice, yes, I said. But the real justice was learning who I am, without the man, realizing that it's never too late to begin again. Chloe squeezed my hand. Let's go home, Grandma. I smiled. Let's build a new one. 6 months later, the city felt different, or maybe I did. The noise of traffic no longer made me anxious. The silence of an empty house no longer frightened me. I had moved into a small white cottage just outside Bellevue, with ivy climbing the porch and a garden that smelled of lavender and earth after rain. It wasn't the grand house Daniel had once dreamed of inheriting, but it was mine, truly, quietly mine. Every morning, I woke to the soft sound of birds in the cedar trees and sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor. Sometimes, when I brewed coffee, I caught myself smiling without realizing it. Freedom, I'd discovered, didn't come with fireworks or applause. It came in the slow, steady rhythm of ordinary peace. Chloe lived with me now. She had finished high school with honors and was taking online law classes at the local college. The first time she told me she wanted to study elder law, I nearly cried. I want to protect people like you, Grandma, she'd said, sitting at the kitchen table one night, her note spread out beside a mug of cocoa. People who are too kind to see how cruel the world can be. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Then promise me you'll never stop seeing the good in people, even when you have to fight their darkness. She smiled faintly. That's what you taught me. The baby was due in a few months. We didn't talk much about the father, there was no point. Chloe had chosen to keep the child, and we were preparing for it together. We painted the spare room a pale yellow and filled it with second-hand furniture, soft blankets, and sunlight. For the first time in years, the house felt alive with laughter again. Every so often, I still received letters from Daniel and Heather Please from prison, written in stiff, practiced words. I never opened them. I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconnection. Some doors, once closed, must stay shut to keep the light inside. Tom visited occasionally, sometimes with Nathan, bringing updates on the civil case against the fraudulent credit accounts. You'll recover every cent, he told me once, smiling. And the foundation you started, it's already helping people. The Carter Foundation for Elder Protection had begun as a simple way to use my settlement money to help others who'd been betrayed by their families, but it grew faster than any of us expected. There were calls from social workers, volunteers, even news anchors who'd covered my story months ago. Mrs. Carter, one letter read, "Because of you, my sister withdrew our father's guardianship petition before it was too late. You saved him." I kept that letter pinned to the refrigerator door, not as proof of revenge, but as proof that something broken could still give light. One cool autumn evening, I sat on the porch watching Chloe water the flowers. She had the same careful way of moving that Richard once had, deliberate, gentle, never in a rush. The setting sun turned her hair to bronze. "Grandma," she called, "do you ever regret adopting Dad?" I thought about that for a long moment before answering. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret loving him. I only regret not realizing sooner that love doesn't mean destroying yourself for someone else." She nodded, quiet, thoughtful. "You think he ever loved you?" "In his own way, maybe," I said. "But sometimes people mistake dependence for love. They take and take, thinking it's affection. It isn't." We sat there in silence as the sky deepened into violet. Somewhere down the street, a wind chime began to sing. I found myself thinking of Richard again, the sound of his laugh. The way he used to hum off-key while fixing the leaky sink. For years, I'd felt haunted by his absence. But now, sitting here with our granddaughter, I felt something softer. Not grief, continuation. "Chloe," I said, "there's one last thing I've learned through all this." She looked up. "What's that?" "That kindness is still worth having, but only when it walks hand in hand with wisdom. I used to think being good meant letting people hurt me. Now I know that protecting yourself is also an act of love." She smiled, setting down the watering can. "I'll remember that." The porch light flickered on, bathing us in gold. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the quiet hum of crickets, the faint laughter of children playing somewhere far off. At 71, I was living the fullest life I'd ever had. I traveled sometimes to San Francisco, to Portland, once even to Vancouver, places Richard had always wanted to see. I read books again, cooked the recipes I'd stopped making, and allowed myself to laugh without apology. I no longer woke from dreams of betrayal. Instead, I woke each morning with gratitude for Dr. Reed's courage, for Tom's unwavering guidance, for Chloe's second chance, and for my own rediscovered strength. Before bed, I often stood by the window, looking at the stars above the garden, and whispered a quiet thank you to the universe, to Richard, maybe to the younger version of myself, who had finally learned to run toward her life instead of away from it. Some nights, I could almost hear his voice again, low and amused. "You did it, Maggie. You finally came home." And I would smile, close the curtains, and think, yes, I did. Because home, I had learned, was never a house. It was the peace you built inside yourself when you refused to be broken anymore. If you've stayed with me until the end, take a deep breath, because this isn't just a story about betrayal, it's a story about awakening. Margaret Maggie Carter spent 70 years believing that love meant sacrifice, being good meant giving until nothing was left of herself. But that doctor's note, "Don't go home, run," was more than a warning. It was a doorway, a chance to start over, to remember that kindness without boundaries becomes a cage, and that even the softest heart can learn to roar when cornered. She lost the family she thought she had, yes, but she gained something far more precious: freedom, dignity, and the quiet strength of self. She built a new life from ashes, turned her pain into protection for others, and found in her granddaughter the proof that love, when it's honest, can heal what greed once destroyed. because sometimes starting over at 70 isn't too late, it's right on time. So tonight, before you fall asleep, remember her lesson: protect your peace, love deeply but never blindly. And when the people you trust try to dim your light, don't stay silent in the dark. Run toward yourself and begin again.